Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 92, Scipio and Scipio. The last two episodes have not exactly been a non-stop party for Antiochus III. But hey, maybe it'll be third time lucky. Let's unpause time and see whether this old mantra holds true for our Seleucid monarch. Just as a warning, this episode is going to be a lot more about inferred sibling rivalry than you expected. Upon being formally sworn in as consuls, Scipio and Laelius got down to business about the matter of the Aetolians. The Aetolian League were given the option by the Roman Senate to submit themselves to the Senate's judgment, or else to pay 1,000 talents and ally themselves with Rome. I'm going to skip the boring legalities and questions of Senate authority that Livy starts Book 37 with by saying that a definitive peace was not struck. Rome then needed to decide which consul got which sphere of influence. Both men really wanted Greece. The initial plan was to draw lots for it. However, Laelius was able to pull more strings in the Senate and innocently suggested that maybe they should just leave it up to the Senate instead. Lucius Scipio conferred with his brother, the famous Africanus, and in the end Africanus also suggested they leave the question to the Senate. Now, this was apparently not usually the done thing, and it caused quite a stir in the Senate itself. You might think that Laelius is definitely going to get Greece at this point, what with everything we've been hinting at previously. However, this is where Africanus messes everything up. He said that, if Scipio the Younger were chosen to go to Greece, he would go and fight under him. The Senate were thrilled with the idea of a rematch between Hannibal and Africanus, so obviously Laelius got crushed by a nearly unanimous Senate decision that the Scipio brothers should go to Greece. Meanwhile, the Aetolian envoys travelled back home and told their countrymen they had no luck in securing a deal. So, they preemptively took Corax Mountain in order to block the route the Romans were going to take to the city of Naupactus. In response, the Romans figured it would be better to do something unexpected, so they attacked Lamia. This region was already on the ropes because of attacks by Philip V of Macedon, and now this unexpected assault was predicted to catch them off their guard. The city of Lamia was thrown into chaos, but the defenders made a valiant defence despite the circumstances. The menfolk of Lamia manned the walls, while the women brought them projectiles and weaponry. Even with the Romans bringing in ladders to climb the walls, the city held out. Acilius, still in charge here at this point, ordered his men to fall back at about noon. This victor of Thermopylae let his soldiers rest and instructed that they be ready at dawn the following day. The next day, as before, the Romans attacked from several directions. The defenders were flagging, and within a few hours Lamia had fallen. Acilius sold 50% of the goods captured and gave the rest to his men. He then called a council to decide on what their next move should be. Since Corax Mountain had been taken by the Aetolian forces, the council were against going for Naupactus. Acilius respected this. However, he didn't want to just sit idle, and he wanted the Aetolians to feel the war coming to them. So the army set out from Heraclea over Oeta, remember the site of Thermopylae, and made for Amphissa. Acilius settled down for a siege, and battering rams attacked the walls in multiple places. The people of Amphissa didn't try anything specific to fight against the rams, but instead just resolved to hold out generally. Amphissa's walls were suffering in multiple spots when the news came through that the new consul Scipio and his brother had arrived with their army at Apollonia and were marching through Epirus and Thessaly. They had with them 13,000 infantry and 500 cavalry. Scipio sent messengers to the city of Hypata, a member of the Aetolian League, asking for it to surrender. However, the people of Hypata responded that, well, they couldn't take an action like that without the entire Aetolian League being in on it. Got to go through the necessary channels after all. Now, Scipio didn't want to be bogged down with Hypatia while Amphissa was still to be taken, holding out as it was against Acilius. So, Scipio sent Africanus out ahead of him towards Hypatia, and he himself marched for Amphissa. Incidentally, I am going to be referring to the consul as Scipio here, and Scipio Africanus as Africanus to avoid confusion. Anyway, by the time Scipio arrived, the inhabitants of Amphissa left the city, as the defences were by now lost from most of it. The people instead fled to the stronghold within the city, which they thought was impossible to take. Scipio made camp about 6 miles from Amphissa. While all of this was going on, Athenian envoys arrived. They headed over to see Africanus first, given that he had headed out in front of the army and was not with his brother the consul. Africanus greeted them warmly, as he was hoping for Rome to gracefully exit this war with the Aetolians, and this seemed like a good enough opportunity. After all, his gaze was locked on the Seleucid king far off in the east across the water. Africanus told the Athenians to convince both the Roman Republic and the Aetolians to want peace. Now, the Athenians managed to convince a group of Aetolian envoys to show up from Hypatia and talk to Africanus about their desire for peace. Scipio Africanus took the opportunity to mention how many countries had placed themselves under his protective hand, and he mentioned that, well, he had been just and fair to all of them. This is when Africanus' younger brother Scipio stuck his nose in, giving the envoys the same answer, fobbing them off that the Senate had given them previously. Disheartened, the Aetolian envoys said they needed to talk to their populace, and the Aetolians went back to Hypatia. Now, the Aetolians did not have the 1,000 talents necessary to pay to the Senate, and they were worried about what exactly might happen if they submitted themselves to the Republic's judgment. So, the delegation were told to go back to the Scipio brothers and ask them, if they really wanted to make peace, if they would lower the fee, or else ensure that this judgment would not extend to violent acts against the Aetolians. Hey, I guess they're trying to prevent retribution. Regardless, this didn't go anywhere. The Romans essentially sicked the Athenians back onto the Aetolians, and the Athenians told the Aetolians not to feel too discouraged by all this. The Aetolians were advised to grovel for a truce of 16 months so they could send people to Rome itself. There would be a delay by doing this, yes, but given how hopeless their situation was, the Athenians said it wouldn't really affect anything. So the Aetolians sent their messengers back to the Scipio brothers. Africanus spoke to them first, and a truce was obtained. Amphissa's siege was ended, and Acilius handed over his control to Scipio. Just a reminder, this is the consul Scipio who's meant to be in charge, instead of his brother Africanus, who seems to be stealing his thunder quite a bit. Africanus told his brother he approved of his plan, which seems a bit condescending. In my mind, as I'm writing and indeed recording these notes, I'm just imagining Scipio grinding his teeth while Africanus stands with his hands on his hips talking about how great he is and interfering with his plans in Greece. However, Africanus wasn't done yet. He advised his brother that they needed Philip V of Macedon to be friendly to them in order to allow them to pass safely through Thrace. So, they sent a man called Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus to go and ingratiate himself with Philip. Now, Philip V was quite drunk by the time Gracchus arrived, and so was in quite a good mood. He accordingly welcomed Gracchus, by this point in his drinking not expecting any kind of trickery. So, Gracchus stayed a while and oversaw preparations for the army, then headed back with the good news to the Scipio brothers. The consul and his brother themselves met up with Philip in Macedonia, and they travelled together to Thrace, making ready to cross the Hellespont. That's where we'll leave it for today. We will switch over to Antiochus' perspective, as indeed Livy does, next time. Until then, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch with the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.